The criminal justice system in South Africa is failing the people of South Africa. People are getting away with impunity. Only about 9% of those cases ends up in our courts. That in fact means that a criminal that commits a violent crime has got a 90% to get away with it. And because of this impunity, we have this crisis in terms of different facets of crime. And part of the impunity is the fact that they are linked with high officials. I said, for instance, when I refer to the Guptas, when they said they're going to be extradited to South Africa. I said, well, that's very good news, but I first want to see whether it's really going to happen. Because I think there are too many politicians that will ensure that they will never come back to South Africa. Because
guys, this whole Zama Zama issue is taking another twist. So there's been some new, part of the Zama Zamas who have actually resurfaced from the shaft now to the surface in the northwest steel fontaine there. And they're really giving some really scary revelations on what's really going on and how they're recruited, what's really going on the ground. It almost appears like a kidnapping situation in a way where they seem to be sort of like promised a job in South Africa, and they come in from their countries only to get into South Africa and find themselves, being deployed on the ground. And even on the ground, sometimes they're really held down with, weapons and forced to work in kind of like a forced labor thing. And what really shocked me is that sometimes this video I'm about to play now actually says that they go without food and water for as long as even, I think, maybe 14 days or something like that. And these guys are starving, and at the end of the day, they're forced to come out. But what's baffling is that the ones who come out are probably the ones that are less useful to the whole operation and the reporter here argues that the ones who stay stuck on the ground are kind of like the main guys, and these guys don't mind being on the ground for as long as 4 or 5 months, because it's kind of like a whole deal, a whole industry altogether. Let's listen quickly to this newscaster here who has been interviewing these youngsters, and I think these are teenagers. I think the guy she's interviewing is 17-year-old or so, who was actually lured from his country to really come in and got stuck now in this shaft on the ground, and has now resurfaced and really exposing what's really going on in the shaft. Let's take a quick listen.
Stephen, the one that we are speaking to, he says that he is 19 years old. He was also explaining the situation that is underground and the kind of work that they do. He was talking about, he has a phone that he had, and he sold that phone for 500 rand. But what is their raising of concern is how they were recruited and finding themselves in Stilfontein, saying that he was here to meet his brother. His brother said that there is a job that he has been able to find for him, only for him to get here and to get to where he gets into a hole and end up underground. Underground, he also talks about people that have guns that are armed, and he had tried to come out, but he was pointed with a gun, and that's why he stayed the number of months that he has stayed there. So that is what we are finding, a bit of similarities compared to also the people that we spoke to that resurfaced on Sunday, Stephen, reciting almost the same thing on how they got recruited here. 2 of them, we are told by the authorities, that they are 16 years old, and as you can see, the law enforcement that are still here monitoring the situation. The 16-year-olds finding themselves in this situation in the labor market, it's something that was also brought to be of concern. The number, per the statement that was released just yesterday, about the number of children that are arrested in this operation Vala Umkoti, that are part of the illegal mining activities that are unfolding here in Stilfontein. That they still have to go and appear before the court, be charged accordingly. He was also explaining that there are more that are coming, Stephen. They was talking about the levels, cell level 3, number 7, about 4 of them that are still on their way, and with the authorities are also saying that they're going to continue monitoring shaft 10 because those that we have spoken to are saying that we should expect that more more illegal miners are going to resurface. 3 here in shaft 10. We also understand that 14 that resurfaced in another shaft, which is a Margaret shaft. You know, that is a shaft that authorities have said that it can be used, to resurface, Stephen. But we'll just give you an update as everything is unfolding this side, when those that are going to resurface. In fact, the guy that we're speaking to, they say that they're expecting that they're going to arrive here tomorrow on Friday. That's the day the police minister, Senzo Mchunu, is expected to come here to receive the report, progress report in terms of the work that has been done so far by the mining rescue experts that have been deployed in Stilfontein.
Yeah. As you could see, it's kind of like a really strange problem. But now the stranger problem is the fact that there's a system that actually doesn't immediately or automatically deport these Zama Zamas when they resurface, but they also have to be sent to court where they are prosecuted, and then a deportation process begins, okay? And, when we see probably as large as 500, 700, 1,000, 2,000 people resurfacing, it's really difficult on where to contain them. You see that in the last video I made, Peter Groenewald, the Correctional Services Minister, was complaining that there aren't enough beds in the prisons in South Africa. So in other words, if we have 1,000 of these Zama Zamas or 2,000 or an overwhelming number coming out, and the courts are not able to process them, in adequate time to set up the whole deportation process and all that, there's nowhere to keep these guys. So at the end of the day, I don't know if the police system is porous. They might end up escaping, returning back on the ground. There's no prison to keep them. It's a really mess. It's a complete mess. I really don't know how. It's a really complicated problem. Let's listen to this white police officer. And I think I really like the fact this is the first time I'm seeing a white female police officer, in really explaining this whole issue. Let's take a quick listen, and I'll be back for a really final comprehensive analysis, following Peter Groenewald. Peter Groenewald now exposes what, the complicity of senior officials in government, senior, officials generally, anyway, as he calls it, senior officials that actually are complicit in this whole problem with crime in South Africa. And I'll be back for some really interesting analysis on the processes also through which this whole Zama Zama world takes place and gets formed, both on the surface and on the ground.
Today, we've just witnessed about 22 resurfacing from this here shaft. From our engagements with some of the officials here, we understand that the vast majority of the illegal mine workers who've re-emerged are mostly from Mozambique, with some from Zimbabwe, and quite a limited number from South Africa. We understand that it's not quite clear who the kingpins of these Zama Zamas are and who are operating and actually directing the operations and sales of whatever is extracted by these Zama Zamas. But we understand that for now, the vast majority of those who have re-emerged have been posted here in Stilfontein, receiving medical treatment. You understand that many of them have went days without water and food and need some significant re-examination of their health before they can be officially processed by police. We understand that while Operation Valwamgoti saw significant successes this weekend, this operation has been ongoing since December last year, and in its intensified work last week, many other illegal mine workers were apprehended. But just to have a better understanding as to what is the process that's going to unfold as the mine workers arrive here, what is going to happen going from this point on, as evening is about to set, and we anticipate that they will not be kept here throughout the night. Adele, thank you so much for keeping with us. We understand that you know that these people are receiving medical treatment. The numbers are still increasing of those resurfacing. But what is to happen to those here, and what will be of them as the evening comes?
As you see, we've been taking them small numbers at a time. We've nearly processed about half of this group, taking them small amounts to an office where they are being questioned. We also have officials here from the Department of Home Affairs assisting us, trying to determine what is, the specific, nationality of these people. And then from there, we process them. We take fingerprints, the normal police stuff. Then, if we are done from here, they are taken to police cells, and then they will be going to court. We have to take them to court within 48 hours.
Now, there are quite a number of concerns, as you said, that these numbers are expected to increase as a couple of days are going to be continuing with the Valumgoti operations. What do you think that is going to be the situation in ensuring that those who resurface don't return back underground?
Well, at this stage, as I said, when they are detained, they are under police guard. Then they will definitely not return. After court appearance, then obviously the court will decide what's going to happen to these people, and some of them most probably will be deported and go through the deportation process. And it's difficult to now say, how quick this is going to happen. But the nice thing is, I think, in this Dr. Kenneth Kaunda district, all hands are on deck. The acting cluster commander currently, the district commander currently is busy with operational plans to place all these suspects at different cells in the areas, because obviously we can't put all 500 in one cell as a matter of also safety. So, they are busy planning and putting plans on the table to handle this huge amount of detainees.
Thank you so much, Colonel Mayberg, for
Brilliant.
your time.
So you could hear from her, you saw how she specified the problem with keeping them, trying to prosecute them within 48 hours and beginning a deportation process to their countries. And that's a long process, okay? Really, really long process. But now let's listen quickly to Dr. Peter Groenewald expose, kind of like what he argues as senior officials that actually kind of like work hand in hand with this crime, gang in South Africa, and makes it really difficult to end the crime problem in South Africa. And I'll be back for that final analysis on the whole Zama Zama world, so to speak.
I've said many times, the criminal justice system in South Africa is failing the people of South Africa. And when I talk about criminal justice, I talk about the police, the Justice Department, and correctional services. And the reason I say that is that people are getting away with impunity. I've served all my years, more than 35 years, on the Portfolio Committee of Police in Parliament. If you look at the statistics, the other day there was a research done by an institution, and they found when it comes to violent crimes, now what is a violent crime? That is murder, rape, robbery of abbreviated circumstances and all that sort of things, that only about 9% of those cases ends up in our courts. That in fact means that a criminal that commits a violent crime has got a 90% to get away with it. And because of this impunity, we have this crisis in terms of different facets of crime. You've mentioned, for instance, the construction mafia. As I said, they're all over, the water mafia, name them all, because they get away. And part of the impunity is the fact that they are linked with high officials, politicians, high officials in the police services, or with whatever department it is. And I said, for instance, when I refer to the Guptas, when they said they're going to be extradited to South Africa. I said, well, that's very good news, but I first want to see whether it's really going to happen. Because I think there are too many politicians that will ensure that they will never come back to South Africa, because then they're going to be exposed. And that's really a sickness of the situation in South Africa. But there's always hope. We must just keep on fighting this corruption, if I want to put it that way. For instance, if I look at correctional services, of course, I said one of my first priority is actually to fight corruption. If we look, for instance, when there are raids in our facilities, the contraband and all that sort of things, and I always say none of those goods have legs. They can't walk into the facility. It must be officials bringing them in. And I can say, from I started the 3rd of July, up to now, 80, actually some more now, but 80 officials already charged for corruption. Because the act is quite clear. If you are part of such, can I say, smuggling in of any contraband, then you are contravening the act. It's a criminal act. So we must fight that. And why I say there's hope, my experience is the moment you start to be strict and you ensure that there's no more impunity, if you ensure that there is consequence management, it sends out a signal. The signal is to the bad people that if you are exposed and we catch you, then you're going to pay a price. But the other positive is the good people, and if I take my department, I said far the majority of the employees are hardworking people, they have integrity, they are honest. Then they start coming forward because they see now that they can come forward and there are some results to expose those bad apples in the basket. And we must continue doing that. And I think we must do it in all the departments. When I look at the crime situation, there's quite an improvement in the police services at the moment. We saw, let's go back to the Zama Zamas in Stilfontein alone, more than 1,000. And I said, yes, in the end, it's good that there's better policing, but they all are going to end up in the facilities where I am the minister of. But we have to address that, and we can talk further on that if you want to.
Brilliant, guys. So you could see that it's a really complicated problem with, this whole Zama Zamas, the crime scene, the allegiance with high officials, as Dr. Peter Groenewald speaks about. And it's really going to be difficult to really get crime under control if these guys at the top do not let go, especially if they are working, both for the people of South Africa, but also really representative of senior officials. I think that's really, really not advisable. But anyway, let's quickly get into this report. The report is actually about, Zama Zamas that actually resurfaced at Orkney. There were at least 565 illegal gold miners, what we call Zama Zamas, who were arrested, on the last weekend in the northwest town of Orkney after the police choked off their food and water supplies and forced them to come to the surface. All right. So it says that the arrests were actually the latest that were made in Operation Vala Umgodi, which seeks to disrupt illegal mining at a time when companies such as Sibanye Stillwater have recorded a spike in such activities, including direct attacks on mine operations and infrastructure against the backdrop of record gold prices. All right. So the Valam Ungodi tax teams, they actually they're led by SAPS and also the South African Defence Force in the Northwest, and they are really intensifying their operations and ensuring that illegal mining activities and operations receive a really major blow. So it says that on this particular weekend, there were 565 illegal mine workers that came to the surface from a shaft. Okay. Now, it says that in an earlier statement, SAPS actually said that Zama Zamas were resurfacing as a result of starvation and dehydration. Okay. Now, SAPS and members of the South African Defence Force, they actually blocked the communities in and around those abandoned mining shafts in Orkney from delivering food parcels, water, and necessities to these illegal miners. So it appears that communities living around this shaft have actually been the supply route to these guys on the ground. So the first thing the SAPS did was to kind of like block the communities from having access and all that. So when they starve them and cut off these supplies, at the end of the day, they are forced to come out. So it says that this act of stamping the authority of the state eventually forced these illegal miners to resurface. Now, the strategy at play here can be summed up as surrender or starve. And SAPS said that as many as 1,000 Zama Zamas may have found themselves without food and water and other necessities. Now, they explained that the Zama Zamas, they actually ply their dangerous and illegal trade for weeks or months at a time underground, and they depend on local communities to provide them with sustenance at highly inflated prices. All right, so they don't mind buying food, buying water at really high prices, and this is how the community also sets up this whole circuit of trade, so to speak, because it benefits them since they get to sell some of their goods at inflated prices, but at the same time the Zama Zamas benefit because they're able to get water and supplies and food. So it says that according to the mining industry and security sources, one of the first signs that a shift change has occurred, that is that hundreds of Zama Zamas are surfacing and hundreds more are about to go down, is when the local shops run out of bread and bottled water. So whenever there's an area where there's a shaft, okay, and the local shops around that shaft suddenly run out of bread and bottled water, know that there's going to be a shift. So in other words, this is a period when you expect that a number of Zama Zamas will resurface, probably to come and seek for refilling of their resources and then go back. So this is kind of like the timing the SAPs have actually studied to really be able to capture some of these Zama Zamas. Now, they explain that the whole Zama Zama problem is tied into what is called a migrant labor system. It says that the majority of those who have been arrested are inclusive of South Africans, Mozambicans, and Basotho nationals, according to SAPs. He says most Zama Zamas, they come from Lesotho and Mozambique, and it's a direct consequence of the decline of migrant labor system, which for decades provided South Africa's mining sector with a pliable workforce that was subjected to harsh exploitation. All right. It says these Zama Zamas are men whose fathers, grandfathers, and great-grandfathers toiled in South Africa's mines for wages which stagnated or fell for decades until the 1970s, and employment opportunities remained scant in Lesotho and Mozambique. So South Africa then became the alternative, because since there are no jobs or employment opportunities fell in Lesotho and Mozambique, South Africa then became a magnet pulling down these workers. All right. Now it says that there's an army that is willing to go on the ground to mine illicit gold. All right. And that they are treating the symptoms, but they are not treating the problems. In other words, the arrests of these guys now, for example, because there's an army on the ground there, this article argues that the arrest by the government and SAPs, of these guys who have resurfaced is only a way of treating the symptoms, but it's not addressing the problem. Okay, this is now according to a mine security analyst. He's explaining that the Zama Zamas, they know that the police and the army cannot sustain this operation, and that they have stockpiles on the ground. They usually send up the guys who are not completely essential to the whole circuit of trade, and the essential guys will continuously stay on the ground. It says that the illegal miners or the Zama Zamas can always make a plan to get other consignments on the ground. And it also seems that no weapons have surfaced, and the guys with guns are still on the ground. So out of all the guys who have resurfaced so far, the 565, according to SAPS in Steelfontein here, none of them have surfaced with guns. So in other words, the dangerous guns are still on the ground, but they just have the non-essential members of this whole circuit resurfacing to the surface. Okay. So it said that Zama Zamas, they target both abandoned and operating shafts, and profits made from the trade must be surging, as the price of gold has also scaled record highs this year, especially 2024, of more than $2,700 per ounce. So we see that the price of gold is also kind of like increasing the circuit on the kind of like the influx of this business, this trade, and also the number of Zama Zamas available, making themselves available to be able to work in these shafts. So it says that the government estimates the cost of illegal mining to the South African mining industry and the wider economy to be about 70 billion rand a year. And much of the illegal gold is destined for refineries in places like I mentioned before, in Dubai and in China, according to the reports, where it is washed in a massive laundromat operated by transnational crime networks. So it's that's where this whole report actually ends, and so that's it for now. This, for me, what I picked from this video, the most interesting part is, you know, the possibility of the fact that one day, if maybe an outrageous number of these Zama Zamas resurface, there will be not much available spaces for SAPs to keep them prior to beginning their deportation phases. And so what then happens? Where are they going to be kept? Are they going to now roam around South Africa, increasing, you know, the number of probably illegal immigrants, or maybe crime syndicate if possible, increasing the potential for crime in South Africa, in society? This is a really complicated problem that, you know, really needs systematic moves by the government to really tackle. So I really don't know how the GNU will go on with this whole Zama Zama problem. But probably the DA probably has a really systematic methodology, since they've actually drafted out a sharp way to address the extortion problem. I'm making a video also. They have a really interesting comprehensive plan to also battle the water problem, like in Johannesburg. Probably there could be a kind of like systematic solution to this problem of Zama Zama, because the more I read it on these Zama Zamas, the more I see the potential for danger and, you know, more threats to the peace of South Africa and South Africa's moving forward into the future. And so I really hope that the government can take up this issue much more tactfully. But I don't know, what do you guys think about the whole issue and Dr. Peter Groenewald's speech here in this video? Share your thoughts in the comments.